Have you ever questioned why some people acted as if you were insignificant? Why they dismissed, minimized, or rendered you invisible? Here's an insight that can overturn what you believed you knew. Carl Jung identified a psychological principle so potent that once grasped, you will never interpret human behavior in the same way again. What if I told you that how others treated you was largely unrelated to you? That their harshness served as a mirror, reflecting what they refused to confront within themselves? Stay with me, because by the end of this explanation, you will understand the hidden psychology underlying mistreatment. More importantly, you will see why you drew it into your life to begin with. This is not about assigning fault. This is about emancipation. And Carl Jung's ideas can free you from a cycle that has held you for far too long. Many of us have struggled with the weight of others' mistreatment, often internalizing it without understanding its deeper source. Comment 1 if you've ever felt invisible or dismissed without explanation. Comment 2 if you've only recently started to see the psychological patterns behind how others treat you. Let us begin with a difficult reality. You have been treated unfairly. Perhaps it was a parent who never affirmed you, a partner who criticized you incessantly, friends who broke your trust, or coworkers who undercut everything you did. You have asked yourself countless times, what did I do wrong? Why me? Am I really that unworthy? In Carl Jung's view, as the founder of analytical psychology, these questions entirely miss the point. The mistreatment you encountered was not arbitrary, nor was it something you merited. Jung devoted decades to examining the human mind, and his findings are startling. He concluded that cruelty follows recognizable psychological patterns unrelated to the victim's inherent value. Here is where it becomes especially compelling. Jung also found that we unwittingly take part in these patterns, not because we desire harm, but due to material lodged deep within the unconscious, something inherited, something we have not resolved. Until we comprehend this mechanism, we will continue to draw the same kinds of people who treat us in the same harmful manner. But why stay with this? Because the explanation can change your life. Carl Jung stated a point many people misinterpret. Until you bring the unconscious into awareness, it will steer your life, and you will label it fate. Let that settle for a moment. From his extensive clinical work with thousands of patients, Jung concluded that humans function on two planes of awareness. There is the conscious mind we notice, and the unconscious that governs as much as 95% of our behavior. The unconscious stores what we have repressed, denied, or refused to admit about ourselves. Jung termed this the shadow. Here is the crucial element. The shadow does not simply remain passive in the background. It actively shapes your reality. It affects whom you find appealing, whom you admit into your life, and indeed, how others treat you. In Jung's view, those who mistreated you were reacting to something unseen that you were projecting unconsciously. Not to your stated intentions or declared values, but to unresolved injuries, disowned parts of self, and elements you consigned to darkness. Their cruelty was not random. They were pulled toward you, and you toward them, by a psychological magnetism neither party recognized. Jung found that this process is entirely unconscious. The one who mistreats you does not rise thinking, I'm going to destroy this person today. And you did not deliberately decide, I want someone to harm me. Nevertheless, the interaction unfolds, guided by forces beneath conscious awareness. This is the choreography of the shadow, and it becomes even more illuminating. Shadow projection can be a difficult concept to grasp, especially when it challenges long-held beliefs about fault and agency. Comment 1. If you've ever realized someone projected their own pain onto you. Comment 2. If you're just beginning to consider that idea for the first time. Jung uncovered one of the deepest truths about relationships. We do not perceive others as they are. We view them through the filter of our unconscious projections. He termed this dynamic shadow projection, and it clarifies why you were mistreated. Here's the mechanism. Every person carries a shadow. These are the elements of self that have been rejected, denied, or deemed unacceptable. Perhaps you learned in childhood that anger was wrong, so you pushed it down. Perhaps you were taught your needs were unimportant, so you dismissed them. These exiled parts do not vanish. They descend into the unconscious and persist. In Jung's account, what we refuse to own in ourselves, we cast onto others. Here's the twist. We also draw individuals who embody the very traits we have disowned. If you disavow your anger, you tend to attract angry people. If you relinquish your power, you tend to attract controlling people. If you stifle your voice, you tend to attract those who will silence you. The person who mistreated you was probably projecting their own shadow onto you. They perceived in you what they despised in themselves, what they could not admit, and so they attacked it in you. Jung noted, this is why abusers often accuse their victims of the very things they themselves are guilty of. The narcissist calls you selfish. The liar calls you dishonest. The cruel person calls you mean. But there is a deeper layer here, and it concerns why you tolerated that behavior. Stay with me. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This is the point at which many people feel uneasy because Jung identified something radical. Those who mistreated you were reflecting your unhealed wounds back to you. Before you object, let me clarify. This is not about blaming the victim. It is about recognizing an unconscious process that keeps you confined. According to Carl Jung, we unintentionally reproduce our early injuries in adult relationships. This is not due to masochism, but because the unconscious attempts to complete what remained unfinished. If a caregiver was emotionally absent, your unconscious coded that experience as this is what love is. Consequently, as an adult, you are drawn without awareness to emotionally unavailable partners. Consciously, you may insist that you want someone attentive and kind, but your unconscious operates a different script that says, find someone who feels familiar, and maybe this time we can fix it. Jung identified this repetition compulsion as one of the strongest drivers in human psychology. We revisit the original injury, seeking a new conclusion. The woman with a critical mother is drawn to critical partners. The man with an absent father gravitates toward friends who leave. The neglected child grows into an adult who settles for crumbs of affection. Those who mistreated you did not appear by chance. In Jung's terms, they were precisely cast actors in a drama your unconscious was staging. They arrived to embody the rejecting parent, the harsh authority, the disloyal friend. Whatever injury within you remained unresolved. Here is the key point. They will continue to appear in new forms until that wound is healed. You can relocate, switch careers, or change partners, yet the pattern persists. Jung called this fate, when we remain unaware, and choice when we become conscious. The question is whether you are ready to awaken, because what follows shows you how. Jung found that unless we become aware of these archetypal patterns, we remain confined within them. We slip into these roles unconsciously, and perform them as though following a script authored millennia ago. Your mistreatment was not singular. It was an old pattern expressing itself through you. Here is the empowering element. When you identify the archetype, you can exit the role. You can decline to remain the victim. You can refuse the scapegoat position. Jung maintained that consciousness is the key to release from these ancient patterns. This leads to the most essential concept. Carl Jung argued that most people move through life wearing a mask. He named this mask the persona, the constructed self. We show others to secure acceptance and avoid rejection. The persona is the version of yourself you believe you must present to function in society. It is the good girl who never shows anger, the nice guy who never sets limits, the stoic individual who never reveals vulnerability. Carl Jung holds that the persona is useful for social life, but it becomes a cage when we mistake it for our true identity. When you overattach to the persona, you become disconnected from your authentic self, from the person you are beneath conditioning and expectations. This is how it links to mistreatment. Jung found that those who operate mainly through the persona draw relationships that uphold the mask instead of respecting the real self. If your persona is, "I'm the person who helps everyone," you tend to attract people who take advantage of your generosity. If your persona is, "I never need anything from anyone," you tend to attract people who offer you nothing. Those who mistreated you often reacted to the persona rather than to your genuine self. They detect the lack of authenticity, the appeasement, and the boundaries you fail to enforce. Exploitative individuals are adept at noticing when someone is cut off from their true power. They can sense a fragile persona from afar. Jung concluded that genuine relationships demand releasing the persona and revealing your true self, including your wounds, needs, and boundaries. When you cease performing and simply exist as you are, everything shifts. Those who mistreated the false version of you cannot thrive when the authentic you appears. Your authenticity repels those who depend on your inauthenticity. First, however, you must recognize who has been living off that inauthenticity. According to Carl Jung, some individuals are psychologically unconscious. They operate from the shadow with no insight into their harmful patterns. These emotional vampires depleted you, and Jung explained why you were a target. Jung argued that unconscious people cannot easily generate their own psychic energy. They must extract it from others. They subsist on your attention, empathy reactions, and emotional output. The more aware and empathetic you are, the more appealing you become as a source. Jung observed that empaths and highly sensitive individuals are especially susceptible to unconscious predators. Why? Because empaths carry potent psychic energy, yet are often estranged from their own shadow. They have suppressed anger, self-interest, and even their capacity for hardness. Consequently, they draw people who display those traits. The narcissist who harmed you, the friend who used you, the partner who manipulated you. Such individuals were attracted to your light, like moths to a flame. But their aim was not to participate in it. Jung held that they sought to put out your light because it reminded them of what they had lost internally. He maintained that unconscious people cannot bear consciousness in others. Your development threatens them. Your healing highlights their injuries. Your boundaries expose their transgressions. Thus, they mistreated you to minimize you, dull your light, and keep you as unaware as they are. But here is the turning point. Jung identified the remedy. Carl Jung emphasized what he regarded as his central contribution: individuation. Individuation is the path of becoming your authentic self. It involves integrating the disowned parts of you and shifting from unconscious to conscious existence. This is precisely how you cease to draw mistreatment. Jung taught that individuation demands the most difficult task of all, confronting your shadow. You must face the disowned aspects, suppressed anger, neglected needs. The power you surrendered, the limits you failed to set, the silenced voice. Everything must be recognized, integrated, and reclaimed. He noted that many avoid this work because it is painful. It feels simpler to blame others for their behavior than to ask, "What in me allowed this?" Remaining a victim seems easier than reclaiming agency. Repeating the pattern seems easier than breaking it. Those who commit to individuation encounter a profound shift. Jung observed that integrating the shadow cultivates wholeness. With wholeness, you no longer pull in fragmented partners. When you acknowledge anger, you stop drawing rage-driven people. When you respect your needs, you stop drawing takers. When you enforce limits, you stop drawing violators. Your energetic signature transforms. According to Carl Jung, individuation shifts you from being acted upon by life to consciously creating your life. You cease to play a role in another's unconscious script and become the author of your own narrative. Yet individuation is not a single event. It is lifelong, and it begins with one decisive choice. Here is what that choice entails. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." This is the point at which you end the cycle of mistreatment. Jung taught that liberation requires insight, coupled with practical steps. Here is his framework. First, identify the pattern. Jung observed that many are so fused with their pain that they fail to notice the repetition. Examine your relationships candidly. Do you repeatedly draw the same type of person in different forms? The same lack of availability, the same criticism, the same betrayal. Awareness is the initial step toward freedom. Second, Jung advised withdrawing your projections. View these individuals not as monsters, but as mirrors. Which of their traits triggers you most? That is your shadow signaling you. If their cruelty infuriates you, where have you been harsh toward yourself? If their selfishness repels you, where have you neglected your needs? This is not to excuse their conduct. It is to restore your power. Third, Jung urged grieving what was missing. The acknowledgement you merited, the love you needed, the respect you earned. Many bypass this stage and remain trapped in resentment. Jung found that unmourned losses bind us to the past. You must grieve what did not occur to make room for what can. Fourth, set new boundaries. Jung regarded boundaries as the embodied form of self-respect. Each time you uphold a boundary, you affirm to your unconscious, "I matter. My needs matter. I will not accept mistreatment." Notice how swiftly some people fall away when you no longer tolerate poor conduct. Fifth, Jung emphasized the need to select different people deliberately. Your unconscious may continue to gravitate toward the familiar. The emotionally distant person may still feel like chemistry. The critical person may still seem honest. You must supersede that programming with intentional choice. Choose the person who feels unfamiliar yet healthy. Choose the relationship that feels unusual precisely because it is safe. Jung noted that individuation reaches a critical point when everything realigns. He named this transformation the end of the old self and the emergence of the new. That is the threshold you occupy now, whether you perceive it or not. Jung warned that transformation is uncomfortable. The former self must pass away. The pleaser must end. The victim must end. The one who settled for crumbs must end. And endings feel like loss. Even when what ends must go, you will grieve old patterns while outgrowing them. You may miss familiar pain, even as you enter unfamiliar peace. Jung found that transformation invites tests. Those who harmed you may reappear offering precisely what you once longed for. Consider it a final examination. Will you return to familiar pain, or will you honor the change? Jung observed that many initially fail and go back. They grant another chance. They hope it will be different. Yet true transformation requires recognizing that the other has not changed. You have, and the self you are becoming no longer fits your former environments. Old settings feel constrictive. Old relationships feel airless. Old patterns become unbearable. That discomfort signals growth. Growth often comes with deep discomfort and the pull to return to what's familiar, even if it hurt. Comment 1. If you've ever gone back to an old pattern hoping for a different result. Comment 2. If you've recently chosen the unfamiliar path of healing instead. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. You are experiencing the pain of evolution. Embrace it." Jung provided theory and also concrete practices. Here is what you can begin doing today to stop accepting mistreatment. First, keep a shadow journal. Each night, note what triggered you, who irritated you, which behavior disturbed you. Then ask, what does this reveal about my own shadow? This habit accelerates self-knowledge. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. This journal makes the unconscious conscious. Second use, active imagination. Dedicate about 15 minutes each day to meditation or calm reflection. Picture yourself enforcing boundaries with those who mistreated you. Rehearse the words you never spoke. This reshapes the unconscious and makes real-world boundaries easier. Third, cultivate witness consciousness. This is the capacity to observe your patterns without condemnation. When the old attraction arises towards someone unhealthy, stop. Notice the magnetism. Say, "That's my wounded child seeking the familiar. But I'm the conscious adult now, and I choose differently." Fourth, Jung advised, you must find your individuation community people who are also doing the work of becoming conscious. You can't heal in isolation, and you can't heal around people who want you to stay small. Seek out therapists, support groups, spiritual communities, or friends who are committed to growth. These people will reflect your light back to you instead of dimming it. Fifth, attend to your dreams. The unconscious communicates nightly through symbols and metaphors. Maintain a dream journal. Track recurring motifs. Dreams reveal what remains unhealed, what seeks integration, and what is emerging. Sixth practice, uncompromising self-honesty. Jung considered self-deception the chief barrier to individuation. Stop rationalizing your tolerance of mistreatment. Stop excusing people who reveal their character plainly. Truth frees you, but often discomfort precedes it. Jung devoted his life to a single inquiry. How do we become our true selves? His answer was this: we become ourselves by integrating what we have disowned, by confronting what we avoided and reclaiming what we projected. Those who mistreated you became significant teachers, not for their wisdom or kindness, but because they highlighted where healing was required. They exposed your injuries patterns and unconscious scripts. Now that you perceive them, you cannot forget. Jung proposed that humanity divides into two orientations. When you choose the path of awareness, one final Jungian layer clicks into place. What you call chemistry, often begins as a projection of your anima, animus, the inner image of the other, onto an outer person. This dovetails exactly with the arc you've traced: shadow persona repetition boundaries. Why are you magnetized to the very type that harms you? Because an unintegrated inner figure is still petitioning for life through them. You think you need that person. In truth, you need the disowned part of yourself they momentarily carry. If you disown strength, you hand it to the controller. If you disown need, you hand it to the taker. Recognizing this does not excuse harm. It returns your energy to its rightful owner. From here, the work is not brand new. It is your existing path, made more precise with draw projections. Set boundaries, choose differently, but add one interior step: conjunctia, the inner marriage. Let feeling and discernment, tenderness and firmness, receptivity and assertion learn to speak to each other rather than duel. As these poles reconcile, you become harder to exploit because you are less divided. You stop searching for a jailer to carry your unclaimed power, or a savior to carry your unclaimed softness. People who once fed on your inauthentic compliance lose interest. People who honor wholeness recognize you immediately. Jung named the protected container for this process, the temenos, a sacred psychic workspace, where you metabolize the shadow instead of leaking it onto others. Practically, your temenos is made of small, repeatable rites already threaded through this piece, a nightly shadow journal that tracks triggers and retrieves projections. Active imagination, where you rehearse the "no, you will speak." Dream work that reveals what still seeks integration. And behavioral boundaries that make self-respect embodied rather than aspirational. One clarification that locks the whole essay together: forgiveness is not synonymous with reconciliation. In Jung's key, forgiveness is the retrieval of projection. I take back what is mine, while reconciliation depends on the other's capacity for consciousness. This keeps the stance: no victim blaming, no empowerment of the offender, intact. When you live this Jung's central principle, individuation seals the argument you've built. You move from being acted upon to authorship. The self, the psyche's organizing center, quietly reorders your affiliations. Old tests may reappear, but they function as a final exam for a chapter that has ended. You no longer require the world to change before mistreatment stops. You change, and therefore your world with you. This is not wishful thinking. It is the ordinary mechanics of the psyche, once the unconscious is made conscious, the very movement you have been describing from the first line to the last. Those driven by the unconscious and those who live with awareness. The former repeat their patterns, invite the same mistreatment and question why life is difficult. The latter liberate themselves. Which path will you take? Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You now possess the insight. The question is whether you will apply it. Mistreatment ends when you decide it ends, not when others change. When you change, the transformation begins now. Bring the unconscious to light. Integrate the shadow. Become whole, and observe your life transform. The power has always been yours. Welcome back to yourself. Thank you for journeying through this exploration. If this was valuable, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who could benefit. This journey through Jung's ideas may have stirred insight or stirred resistance. Both are signs of something moving. Comment 1 if this helped you see a long-standing pattern in a new way. Comment 2 if you feel inspired but unsure where to begin your own individuation.